So another day of Eagles training camp is in the book, so let's recap it here on Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. Hope all of you out there are having a great weekend. This was a day in which the offense really did win the day against the defense, and Philadelphia was led by Jalen Hurts, who up to this point in training camp, throughout a few practices so far, has been extremely accurate, making really good decisions with the football, and his numbers today at practice were really, really good. Now, the pads will come on very quickly. As of right now, no pads, but still, Hurts is displaying a lot of accuracy, but also just making quality decisions with the football and where he decides to go with it. Today, Eliot Shorr-Parks with the numbers, 16 of 19 for Hurts, no touchdowns, no picks, but he did complete some really difficult throws downfield at the NovaCare complex and was really spreading the football out all across the yard. And he was also aggressive with how he was distributing the football, where he was, but also completing some of the tight window throws that we saw him really make a leap forward with last year in 2022 as compared to his previous two seasons. Kept the ball out of harm's way, and the stat that I continue to point to that I don't think Jalen Hurts gets enough credit for among some of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL is how little he turned the ball over last year, because I do believe that really feeds into what makes him elite. Some of the best quarterbacks out there are the quarterbacks who make good decisions, but are also aggressive as well. You don't want a quarterback who's going to be check down Charlie. You want a quarterback who's going to take risks, sometimes calculated risks, push the ball downfield, but also find a way also to not turn it over. And given how much Hurts had the ball in his hands last year, it was so impressive how little he put the ball in harm's way, and that's really been the theme so far of training camp. So if this is really who Jalen Hurts is, and he can continue on this trend, that's great news for him, especially when that contract extension is going to set in. Last year, 460 passing attempts. He only threw 6 interceptions. Some of those could have been picked, and they were not, of course, but you can say that about any quarterback, but also how much he ran it on top of those 460 passing attempts. He only had 2 lost fumbles. Unfortunately, that was in the regular season. One of the big lost fumbles did come in the Super Bowl, which really did change the momentum of that game. But 8 combined turnovers last year for Hurts. And so far in training camp, he's rarely, if ever, putting the ball up for grabs for the defense. And the connection between him and A.J. Brown continues to be a dominant one. And Howie Roseman certainly deserves a lot of flack for taking Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. There have been a lot of draft misses at that wide receiver position. Jalen Reagor, he might even be on the roster bubble for the Minnesota Vikings going into 2023. But I've said this, I think Howie Roseman has made up for the misfire on the Reagor pick by taking Devontae Smith and then trading for A.J. Brown. You give Hurts 2 very good weapons and 2 guys who combined to be one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL. It just makes the life for your young quarterback a lot easier. Now, Hurts wasn't only connecting with A.J. Brown today in South Philly. Stop me if you've heard this before. Quez Watkins stole the show. He continues to be a training camp and preseason star, and he's always been a player who's grabbed storylines and been at the center of a lot of discussions at this point of the calendar year. But entering the final year of his rookie deal, can he finally put it all together in the regular season? And while he did have a huge day today, making difficult grabs, a lot of explosive plays, Nick Sirianni did go out of his way when he was asked earlier this offseason during OTA's minicamp who's impressed him the most and who's made a lot of progress. he did say Quez Watkins. And with him going into the final year of his rookie contract, like, this is a huge year for him. He even admitted last year had to be better. He disappointed himself. That drop in the Super Bowl and misplaying that long ball from Hurts, that has to eat at him, or at least you hope it would, because that could have won you the football game. He did have that shoulder injury, but still, no excuses for Quez Watkins any longer. You've been that vertical home run threat who can take the top off of the defense in training camp and in the preseason before. Can that translate to the actual game? Because when you make really nice catches on a day like this, people will talk about you. But then they'll also talk about you if it doesn't translate to the game field. But if Quez Watkins can be consistent as that vertical threat, it really helps this offense. It opens up so much in the running game. It opens up so much for Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, but also Dallas Goedert on some of those underneath routes, because if Quez is on the field and he's actually making plays, the opposing defense has to have a safety or two who's going to have to count for him on that side of the field. Otherwise, the Eagles are just going to thrash the opposing defense with a lot of big plays downfield. Quez Watkins, good day at practice today, was very, very dominant. Now to Sidney Brown, really starting to flash here. I love the pick out of Illinois. And in the pre-draft process, I had pinpointed Sidney Brown as a player that I really liked. Instinctual player, he's yoked, he's maximized his frame. He's a guy who played for the number one defense in college football last year with Illinois. Instinctual player, though, who always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, didn't lack any fear, a hard hitter, very physical. He could have had a really big hit on a play in which he had those early diagnosing skills that I've talked about before. What's interesting is what his usage and what his role is going to be, because he could get to a point where if he continues to play like this, he could steal first-team reps away, but from who? Terrell Edmunds or Reed Blankenship? Because the Eagles last year used two high safeties, 39%. Sean Desai, as part of that Seahawks defense last year, 42%. The problem here, Illinois, while they had a lot of defensive success, they only used two high safety sets 13% of the time. That was the lowest in FBS. Now, Sidney Brown is athletic enough to really play all around the field, 4.47, 40-yard dash. And because of that instinctual style that he has and the football IQ that he has, he can kind of read plays before they happen. But I'm interested to see how Sean Desai uses him and at what safety spot. Sean Desai is going to run a multiple defense, a 4-3 and 3-4. Of note here, Jordan Davis is still like 340, 345 pounds, but he did say after practice he feels better than he did last year just because the conditioning is better. But Davis is getting reps in a four-man front. So Sean Desai is going to switch it up a little bit. And then as part of that defensive scheme, does he change or alter the scheme to get Sidney Brown on the field if he continues to ball out? To starting linebackers now. Discussed this position in depth on yesterday's show because Howie hinted this past week that the Eagles could make a move. Nicholas Morrow struggling in coverage. Nakobe Dean hasn't really stood out. And this is kind of the case for Nakobe Dean throughout OTAs and minicamp. He just didn't do anything to really pop, whereas a guy like Christian Ellis continues to. For Nakobe Dean, because of the same attributes that Sidney Brown has, he just might be a better game player. The Eagles clearly think a lot of him because they gave him the green dot to relay the calls from Sean Desai to the defense. But if both of those players don't pop or they continue to struggle a little bit, Howie Roseman openly said this past week, we could look to make a move specifically at linebacker. Nolan Smith also continues to turn heads. Good pass rush and a pressure on Jalen Hurts today. And I love this dude's personality. He said verbatim, I can't wait to start hitting the shit out of people. He can't wait for the pads to come on. And I'm excited to see what Nolan Smith is going to be able to do when the pads do come on, because I want to see how that speed element around the edge does translate. And I want to see if he can add physicality on top of the finesse and the speed, because that is a deadly combination right there, which makes Hassan Reddick really dangerous. Speaking of Reddick, a player who has a very similar build to Nolan Smith, who again made more plays today, made plays on Friday, made plays on day one of training camp. Everybody at the NovaCare complex is like, shoot, we got him at number 30. Hell of a haul by Howie Roseman. But Reddick, limited participant because of the groin injury. This is progress that he's making with that injury. So hopefully he's going to be able to get on the field very soon, as the pads are set to come on very quickly. But as we know, the Eagles, very, very conservative as far as their approach to hitting in training camp and then stringing together physical practices. They have not done a lot of that under Nick Sirianni. That does lead to them not being the best tackling team early in the season. But last year, they were number 3 in injury rate. And if they can duplicate that, they can once again be successful here in 2023. Before we hop on out of here, subscribe to the show. Eagles content, Eagles analysis, training camp news every single day. Preseason, regular season coming up around the corner. That only means we're going to continue to up our game here on Eagles Now. If you're still kicking it with this, give me a real one down below, because that means you're a real John. Enjoy the rest of your Sundays. Catch you later here on Eagles Now.